Welcome travelers, Flocat here. Today we're going to be discussing something that almost every single Genshin YouTuber will touch on at some point in their YouTube career. Yes, we're going to be talking about the state of Genshin, what I think about the state of Genshin, and to ask the age-old question, is Genshin Impact dying? Welcome back. And yeah, I bet you were expecting to see me actually in Genshin, but today's going to be a little different because I'm just going to be talking and then showing some sources I found while Googling around trying to answer this mysterious question, this enigma of a question about whether Genshin Impact is dying or not. To answer this question, we first need to figure out what exactly would it mean to say Genshin Impact is dead. Well, I guess you could say that the servers are shut down, like the company ran out of money, the project failed, and it's a dead game that way. Or you could say that no one plays the game anymore. It's just completely dead because there's no interaction, and even if the servers are online, it's a dead game. Well, in the first scenario, running out of money, we do have some information regarding that. So we're just going to jump through a variety of sources, the first of which is GamerRant. And you can see for yourself, Genshin Impact made more money in its first year than any other game. Made billions during its first 12 months, narrowly beating out Fortnite in its most profitable first year. Next one is from ScreenRant. Genshin Impact beats Fortnite, GTA 5 revenue in the best first year ever. And the last one from Dexerto, Genshin Impact hits $2 billion in revenue as it celebrates 1-year anniversary event. So while searching to figure out exactly how much miHoYo made from Genshin Impact in its first year, I wasn't really able to find conclusive numbers. And I think that's just because there's a variety of markets at play. It's the Google market, Android market, the iOS market, PlayStation. They all have to report their earnings, and then that all has to be consolidated. There really hasn't been any good reporting on that kind of information yet. One thing we can say is that Forbes wrote an article about Genshin Impact saying that $1 billion in mobile revenue and the 7 highest earning characters. At this point, it's pretty clear that Genshin Impact has made a lot of money, billions of dollars in fact. The next question would be, how much money does it cost to create Genshin Impact or to run Genshin Impact as a live service game? The answer we have right here. It was $100 million to develop the game. They expect $200 million every year for development. Based on the first year earnings and the most conservative estimates of those earnings, the game will be funded for the next 5 years at least, and obviously more as long as they continue to make money. Alright, so now that we got that boring math out of the way, we can be pretty assured that miHoYo has made enough money to keep the game running for quite some time. The other concern that we have is it gonna die because everyone quits? Is everyone just gonna get bored with the game? And that we have less evidence to prove the state of the game in that sense. There are some statements made in these articles that despite the game dwindling in popularity after its release, it's actually held strong in revenue. So what does this say to me? Well, I think context is really important in this situation because Genshin Impact came out during a time where there wasn't really much to play, and not only that, we're all stuck inside because of the pandemic. I believe that that's why Genshin Impact had such a successful release in the first place. miHoYo hasn't said anything to this effect because it wouldn't be good PR, but I am almost certain that Genshin Impact was way bigger upon release than they ever intended it to be. For that reason, I believe that a lot of the people that started playing Genshin simply played it because there was nothing else to do. And some of those people actually enjoy the game. Some of those people are gonna quit. That's just kind of the natural state of a new game. You have a lot of people coming in to see what's up, and then over the course of the first month, 2 months, 3 months, they drop off. The thing about Genshin is that people that have a lot of problems with the game will stick around for a long time just because there are aspects of the game, despite those issues, that keep them engaged, keep them wanting to come back. And I think that says more than the complaints. Now, I already know what everyone's going to say in the comments and what everyone's thinking. We're all thinking about the endgame. How can this game survive without an endgame, right? That's clearly a sign that this game must be dying. Well, to have this conversation, we first have to think about what is the intended endgame for Genshin Impact. Traditionally, gacha games focus heavily on training your units, building those characters up to conquer the combat of the game. But in this case, miHoYo has decided to do something kind of interesting. Instead of gating combat, they allow the players to play through the content to ease up the accessibility and reduce the grind. Now this is great for casual players because it means that with a minimal amount of effort and knowledge on the combat systems, you can actually play through the whole story. You can beat almost all of the content in the game. But for the hardcore players, it creates a predicament where the only challenge in the game is Abyss Floor 12. And at that, it's either completely beatable by you, or it's a DPS check that you just simply cannot meet. And that creates a lot of frustration with those players. So now we have this conflict between two kinds of players, a casual and a hardcore player. And in this conflict, we can find the root of the issue. How do you appease both people? So we're stuck in this spot where MiHoYo has to balance between casual players who may or may not have played a video game before and a hardcore player base that has honestly probably played video games most of their lives. I actually think that this is not as big of an issue as everyone thinks it is. For instance, everyone always portrays this as some big conflict where like either the hardcore players have their way or the casual players have their way. I think that MiHoYo has shown that they can create a combat system that relies on like a couple buttons and also add depth to that combat so that when you want to improve your skills and want to learn more about the mechanics, there's tons of information for you to digest. Despite the game design being fantastic, there's no content, right? There's nothing to really test the bounds of your abilities. This is something that MiHoYo really has to tackle in the near future, or else the future of Genshin does actually look pretty bleak. But before we spiral into that dark, dark abyss of nihilistic despair, I do have some hopium for you. To start off, allow me to establish a few points. Dendro hasn't been released yet. There's an entire element that has not been implemented into the game. There are many reasons as to why the developer might withhold an entire element from a game, like maybe to solve critical balancing issues that might be plaguing the player base. Also, MiHoYo has been testing a lot of combat events since probably patch 1.2, 1.3, and as someone who's played through all those events, I can tell you that they've progressed over time. They continue to rerun the same kind of events like fighting a bunch of bosses or running through a domain. But every time they seem to change it up, add something, twist up the mechanics, and it kind of makes you wonder like, why are they doing that? Well, here's my best guess as to why they're doing that. You know how we get those surveys in the mail every single patch? Well, I think that largely MiHoYo runs these events, takes the feedback from those events, and then tries to think, how can we make this event better the next time around? And if the players are satisfied with the result of that event, they can simply rerun it in the future with maybe a few tweaks. Now, I do have examples of both of these kinds of events. We had the Misty Dungeon event around 1.5. It was like a roguelite, like the first attempt at it. And now this time around with the Shadow Warriors Labyrinth event, way better. I mean, a huge step up. I thought the Misty Dungeon event was cool because I got to try some units out, like Albedo. It was very boring. I mean, I did it to get the primos, you know? The Labyrinth event, on the other hand, was actually really fun, and it felt like they took the feedback, specifically that I had, towards the Misty Dungeon, and implemented it into the Labyrinth. When Theater Mechanicus first came out for Lantern Rite, I was actually super into it. Me and a friend went through the whole event together, and it was a good time. That being said, it seemed like everyone actually really liked that event, so they reran it with sort of like minimal changes. They just added more RNG aspects to it, which I personally didn't enjoy the second time around. That aside, there's strong evidence to assume that MiHoYo is listening to player feedback. They're just not very good at communicating that they're doing it. That's enough about combat events. My last little piece of hopium actually comes from the fact that I've been trying out Honkai recently. Honkai is actually really fun, but it has some issues in accessibility. What do I mean by this? I mean that Honkai has so many overlaying systems that often don't really resemble each other. And that can be really confusing for someone, especially someone who doesn't play games a lot. Because it's like learning how to drive a car, and then ride a bike, and then rollerblade, and then ride a unicycle, all to achieve one end. So if you're not a hardcore gamer, Honkai ends up being kind of a weird experience and can often feel disjointed. Based on what I've seen from MiHoYo's history in game development, every time they release a new game, they fundamentally focus on fixing the biggest flaws of the last game. Now, if you ask me, that's actually pretty smart game design. Take the strengths of the things that worked well and focus more on solving the problems that you were unable to solve the last time. When you put it all together, you see a game that was massively more successful than it was intended, and a game where the creators are really focused on making the experience feel immersive and coherent, because in the development of their last game, they accidentally created a barrier to entry for new players, and they have to compensate by giving a lot of new player rewards, which I would know because when I started Honkai, I got a lot of rewards. So when I ask about whether Genshin Impact is going to die or not, all I can really think to say is, not yet, but maybe? I hope not? It really just depends if MiHoYo can figure out how to satisfy a hardcore and a casual player base at the same time. Rather than focus on the conflict, I think that we should focus on the potential. Because if MiHoYo pulls this off, then we've got years and years of happy gaming to come. So yeah, make sure to be polite when you're writing those surveys. Alright, well that's going to bring us to the end of the video. Thank you so much if you watched to the end. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the support my channel's been getting lately. I'm going to post another video today related to some big news on my channel, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. In your comments, let me know how you're enjoying Genshin Impact. Are you feeling burnt out? Are you excited for the future? What's going on in your mind? And remember, stay healthy, stay hydrated. Peace.